Well, let's now discuss how companies are focused on driving growth as we head into 2023 with a potential recession looming, and why business leaders should think about trust when it comes to the equation. Ashley Reicheld is principal at Deloitte Consulting. She wrote a book on that. It's called The 4 Factors of Trust: How Organizations Can Earn Lifelong Loyalty. She joins us now. Ashley, great to have you with us this afternoon. When I think of brands and companies that have earned loyalty, companies that come to mind are Apple, Patagonia for many people, I think, Nike for a lot of people. And then there are those companies that have perhaps are in the process of losing loyalty right now. I wonder if a company like Southwest that's going through what it's going through, canceling 2/3 of flights on a day like today and, leaving passengers stranded for days at a time. What separates these two types of companies?
Airlines have had a particularly difficult year when you include the summer, when you include all of the vacation delays. It's been pretty tough. When you think about it, trust is at its core. Do you make and keep good promises? And the challenge for airlines right now is they're making a lot of promises, but it's pretty hard to keep them given all the weather that's happening. The things that tend to distinguish our companies that do really well are they do just that. They make a good promise, which we describe as doing something with humanity and doing it transparently. Am I giving you all the information you need to make a choice?
Yeah.
And then can I deliver on that promise, and can I do it reliably over and over and over again? Those are the 4 factors of trust that generate results for companies.
And when we talk about trust, are we talking about it just from the perspective of the company and its customers, or is this more about the company and its employees?
Whenever there's a human, an individual, you can have or lose trust. So really, if companies want to build trust, they can't just focus on customers. They have to first build trust with their employees.
Yeah.
And their employees, in turn, build trust with their customers. And that's what delivers those exceptional results.
What about in situations, Ashley, where maybe those two things conflict with each other, meaning the company's obligation to its employees and the company's obligation to its customers, or other outside factors? One example that comes to mind this year that we saw, of course, was with Disney and Bob Chapek and the response to the Don't Say Gay bill, the idea that he had to sort of take a stand on something that, at least we know in hindsight, he didn't really want to take a stand on, but there were a lot of forces sort of pushing and pulling him in both directions that he had to address. How do leaders deal with those types of situations?
Well, you're talking about a new set of stakeholders these days than you had maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was pretty simple. Am I earning share returns from my holders? Am I returning value? I think these days you have many more people to balance, and that equation becomes much more multivariate and therefore much more challenging. You can't just make your shareholders happy. You have to do that because you've made your employees and your customers happy. And sometimes there is no perfect solution, but there are companies that even in times of great difficulty have done a phenomenal job. Since we were on airlines earlier, let me point to Delta as an example. When Delta started the pandemic, their sales overall, their carriage dropped 90%, I think. And yet the CEO at Bastion not only took a pay cut, but announced that they wouldn't furlough involuntarily a single employee. And they didn't throughout the entire pandemic. At the same time, they also made the choice to keep the middle seat open, leaving space between customers, which, maybe not scientifically backed, made everybody feel more comfortable. So it was a pretty difficult choice. And some argued at the time that could potentially lose needed revenue or drive up costs that they needed to shave. And at the end of the day, Delta came out on top. In fact, they're able to charge a premium for the service.
Hey, Ashley, we are someone, certainly Bloomberg, cover the public markets. We cover the private markets too, as well. But when we're assessing the success of a publicly held company, we're looking at, the financials, we're looking at the balance sheets, we're looking at those metrics. When does trust become a metric that really values and is valued more by shareholders and investors? Because I do think a company that does good but doesn't do so well in terms of the top and bottom line, they're going to get punished.
That is very well said. And the truth is there's a very strong relationship between trust and performance. So, for example, in our research, trusted companies not only did better on average, they did better magnitudes of order more. In fact, up to 400%. Outperforming their peers. So we know that trust drives outsized value, and arguably it'll be a fiduciary responsibility. My hope is, as we fast forward and we start to look into the future, trust and trust ID will be one of the measures that not only companies use to evaluate their relationships with their customers and employees, but that shareholders can use to evaluate which stocks make sense, which companies are in position to drive real growth.
Ashley, are there any industries where this doesn't really matter. Like I think of industries with not a lot of competition, for example, like wireline broadband internet, for example, and cable providers that don't necessarily have competition, and routinely they're ranked when it comes to customer service among the worst when it comes to industries.
And what a fantastic example that is, because cable companies 10 years ago, man, you could wait around all day hoping that technician would show up, and maybe they would, and maybe they wouldn't, and maybe you'd have internet or not. But it didn't really matter because you could either have cable or you couldn't. There was no competition. But now if you fast forward 10 years and you have streaming service competition, you have internet competition, the level of service that you're getting from your cable company is dramatically improved. In fact, the same cable company that I had 10 years ago now pays you if their technician is late, which is a pretty dramatic change in terms of how people behave. So certainly if you're the only option, then all bets are off. But I think the good news about open markets is that doesn't stay the case forever.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Ashley, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Ashley Reicheld, principal at Deloitte Consulting. Her new book, it's called The 4 Factors of Trust, How Organizations Can Earn Lifelong Loyalty. We appreciate her time on this Tuesday.